him. But look at what Jesus is in the midst of his storm. The Bible says in the midst of his storm that Jesus is in the hinder part of the ship asleep. But that ain't the tripped out part, y'all. Can I tell y'all what tripped me out? What tripped me out is Jesus had the audacity to have his head on a pillow. Y'all missed it. Y'all missed it. Jesus was tranquil. He was peaceful. He was at ease. He was straight up chilling. He made a decision. I don't care how much the winds blow. I don't care how big a fool the devil acts. I'm not going to allow anything the devil does to upset my rest, because I know my purpose and I've already pointed and I'm going to the direction that I was placed here for. So I refuse to give up my rest just because the devil has acted a fool. And that's what God told me to tell some of y'all in here today. He told me to tell you, stop allowing the enemy to upset your rest. He said rest in him. Y'all ain't hear me here. Stop allowing the devil to come on your job and act a fool and you get angry and start cussing everybody out. Stop allowing the devil to come to your house and get you all angry with your wife, and stop allowing him to get you all angry at your children. Make a decision. I know what my purpose is, and I refuse to allow you to make me act out of what God has called me to do. I'm going to do what God said by any means necessary. Is there anybody in this house? So then you need to understand what the Bible begins to tell us here. I hope y'all praying with me because I feel like preaching. You need to understand what the Bible begins to tell us here. Jesus is in the hull of the ship asleep. He's in the hull of the ship tranquil. He's in the hull of the ship relaxed. He made a decision. I'm not going to allow anything to upset my rest. I'm going to relax and I'm going to chill in the midst of my situation. Why? Because I know that I'm going to make it to the other side. And here the Bible begins to tell us, if you will, that the storm began to rage. It tells us, if you will, that the storm began to blow so tough that the disciples that were on the boat and the other little ships that were with him, the Bible says that they were now filling now. The Bible says that they were about to be turned over, if you will, and they were almost full. And the Bible begins to blow our minds here now, because the Bible says that the whole dynamic of the text begins to shift. How then does the dynamic of the text begin to shift? Well, the Bible says that somebody in the midst of the storm understood that this wasn't no regular storm. They understood that this wasn't no normal storm. So they began to talk to one another and said, listen here, y'all, somebody needs to go wake up Jesus, because what we're going through now ain't no normal situation. What we're going through now is a little bit more difficult than we thought in the beginning. Somebody needs to go wake up Jesus. And I can imagine in my mind, beloved, that they begin to converse with one another, begin to ask one another, well then, who gonna go wake up Jesus? And I could see them begin to converse, and somebody said, well, send Peter down there to wake up Jesus. And they said, no, we can't send Peter down there because Peter may get down there and start cussing and begin to upset the master. So we can't tell him to go wake up Jesus. And I can see them saying, well, let's send Thomas down there to go wake up Jesus. And they begin to say, no, we can't send Thomas down there because he may get down there with his doubting self and begin to upset the master. Can I preach a few more minutes in here? So I can see them choosing to use the one that will lay his head on the master's breast. I can see them choosing the one that was close to Jesus. And I can see him walking down there in the midst of the storm and deciding to lay his head on Jesus's breast. And he said, Jesus, don't you care that we perish? And I can see them conversing with one another. But all of a sudden the Bible says that Jesus makes a decision in the midst of the storm. Notice what the Bible says in the text. The Bible says that Jesus decided to arise. Tap somebody and tell them it's time to get up. The reason why Jesus made a decision to get up in the midst of his trouble, because a very simple point. As long as the storm was just affecting Jesus, Jesus had the option to lay there in the midst of the storm because he knew he was going to get to the other side. But as soon as the storm began to affect people around him that he loved, as soon as the storm began to deal with people that was important to him, as soon as the storm began to affect people around him that was dear, that's when Jesus made the decision, I can't stay here no longer. I got to get up now. And that's what God told me to tell somebody. As long as your situation is just affecting you, you got the option to lay there in the midst of your trouble, because the enemy's not going to stop you from getting what God said you can have. But as soon as your storm begins to affect people around you that you love as an individual, as soon as your storm begin to come into your household, as soon as your storm begin to come into your marriage, as soon as your storm begins to affect your relationships, then it's time for you to make a decision. I can't lay here no more. I got to get up from where I am, and I got to do damage against the enemy. Is there anybody here ready to do damage against the devil? I feel like preaching a little while. Can I preach a few more minutes here? And the Bible begins to blow us away, because it begins to share with us in the text that Jesus decides to get up from where he was and to go to where the enemy was, out into the midst of the storm. Now I'm just a little bit different here. I don't choose to believe that Jesus tried to be all deep and philosophical in the midst of the storm. You know, like some of us are. I don't believe Jesus called on all the covenant names of his father. I don't believe he called on Jehovah Jireh. I don't believe he called on Jehovah Nessie. I don't believe he called on Jehovah Tiskanu. I don't believe he called on El Elyon. But I believe he was still a little sleepy, still a little groggy in his walk. You know how it is when you first wake up. You just don't get up and come out of sleep. But when you're real tired, a lot of times you're a little bit groggy. And I choose to believe that in the midst of Jesus' storm, that Jesus got up a little bit different. The Bible begins to blow us away, because when we begin to read the text, the Bible begins to tell us that Jesus walks out in the midst of the storm, and I can see him out there right now. He walked out with one eye closed, a little bit groggy and sleepy, and he didn't get out there real deep. He didn't get out there real sick. But when he walked out in the storm, he said two sets of words. He said, peace, comma, be still, period. And I went back to God because I was a little confused, and I began to ask God a question. I said, God, why in the world did Jesus say peace and be still? Because when he said peace, he meant be still. And when he said be still, he meant peace. Remember, I told y'all to put a pin in that, and God began to blow my mind. Can I tell y'all what God told me? He said, Marvin, you done tapped into something. I said, wait 1 minute, God. I'm in 5th gear. I ain't got time to play. He said, you done tapped into something. I said, God, what are you saying? He said, you done tapped into something. I said, God, why in the world did Jesus say peace and be still? He said, do you really want to know? I said, yes, God, I want to know, because I'm in 5th gear now, and I'm trying to close this thing out. He said, well, when he said peace, he was speaking to the disciple spirits, and when he said be still, he was speaking to the elements. What are you trying to tell me, preacher? I'm trying to tell somebody that the same power that he had back then is the same power that you got right now. I wish I had somebody that understood in this house that God is saying, no more the victim, but walk in victory. Touch 2 or 3 people. Tell them, say, neighbor, no more the victim, but walk in victory. It's your time now. You done gone through too much, stayed up too many nights, had too many heartaches, shed too many tears, and now it's your season of breakthrough. Is there anybody in here ready to go and take back everything the devil stole? When you get home from manpower, know that your mission is to let the enemy know, I'm not no Johnny come lately, I'm not no Ron the mill old Joe, but I'm God's man. Is there anybody in here know you're God's man? I said, is there anybody in this house Know that you can do all things through God that strengthens you. Say it! Say it! I wish I could preach like I feel like preaching, but God told me to tell you that when you get to your house, that your mission is very simple. Don't go home deep. Don't go home deep. But when you get to your house, let the devil know the boss is back.